I'm going to bring on our panelists for the next session. And who do we have coming up first? My man, Joe. Where are you at, dude?
What's up?
I put this up. Wait, can we see your shirt real fast? Are you rocking this
I'm
one?
not rocking it today. I'm rocking
Oh, you're rocking the
sorry.
mother duck one.
You're not rocking your
Oh,
beard though, so I guess we're even. I was like,
I'm wearing mine. It's okay.
you are.
It's okay. So I got you on this panel. We've also got Beverly on this panel. Where are you at, Beverly? Hello. Next up, where's Sadie? Sadie, hello. How you doing?
Doing good.
All right. Hey, there's
Oh,
Victor.
Victor's
There he
back.
is.
Can you see us?
There's
Can you hear
Beverly.
us?
She's moving now.
But the main thing on this, and I might have to do hot potato over to you guys, which I fully trust you're capable of doing, running your own panel. So the idea of this panel is data scientists and data engineers and how they can best work well together. And I think Sadie and Joe, you are both coming from the data science world, right? And
Right.
now doing a
Yeah.
lot of data engineering stuff. So, uh, Joe, and I'll kick it off to you first. If you have some burning questions, Victor, we see and hear you. All good, man. It's all good. I think you might be asking questions in the chat, but basically the reason. Let me give you a little background on why I wanted to create this panel, and especially with you folks. I feel like a lot of times many things can be fixed if we have shared terminology and if data scientists understand like what data engineers goals are and what they're dealing with every day, and if data engineers do the same with the data scientists. And so I wanted to explore that kind of space for a little bit. I'll kick it over to you, Joe, and I'll let you get rocking with it first.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting. Can you hear me as well?
Yeah.
I
I
just keep
got you,
dropping
bud.
everybody off here, so it's great. Um, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I got into data science before it was data science and data engineering before. I guess that was so I sound like the ultimate hipster. I can talk about how many days I CrossFit as well if you'd like. But it's an interesting one. I feel like if you go back, I was actually on a hike today talking to somebody about this. But if you look back at the origins of data engineering, it sort of came about, I would say, at least in its recent incarnation, kind of by accident. There's always a big tech version of it, but it was very much to support data scientists in ways that data scientists couldn't support themselves on their own, or were not given support, right? Namely, setting up the infrastructure and the foundations to upon which to do data science. And so that's the original incarnation of it. But then you fast forward to today, and data engineering is a pretty popular and useful job title. Obviously, we're having a whole talk about it, a whole conference actually, about how data engineering
Yep.
can work with AI. So it's come a long ways. I'm more curious about what happened to data scientists. I would love more people's opinion on that at some point in the conversation. But that's
Can,
that's my answer
can
to
I
your
add on
question,
to what
Nikos.
you said, Joe? Because I feel similar, which was, I don't know if I became a data scientist before it was a thing, but definitely 10 years ago. So it's been a little while. And I
Well,
will say, at first was like data science was this kind of full stack developer in data science, right? You were the data engineer, and then people realized like that's too much. And so data engineering got split out. And then I think everybody realized that actually data engineering really is the meat of what data science was, and that we need way more of that than we
Yeah.
actually need of like the model building, right? And I think that one of the key problems is like a lot of the data science education didn't teach fundamental principles of data engineering. Like for me in my master's program with data science, it was so hard on the model building and the visualization. And
mm,
yes, you took a SQL class, but then I got into the real world and was like, oh, it's just all SQL and all pipelines. And I think that part of the problem from it came just like they were trying to pipe out data scientists as fast as possible because 10 years ago that was all the rage. and really missed a lot of like the foundational concepts of data engineering, which is why I think we've seen more of the rise of data engineering these days versus data science. But I'd be curious what your opinion is.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you look at I think around the time you were getting into data science, I think the curriculum is very model heavy, right? So it was probably, I'm guessing, Python, sklearn, all that fun stuff, and then maybe some matplotlib thrown in. Did you learn SQL? Was that one of the things too, or that was also when SQL was sort of like thrown under the bus as like, oh, we don't need this anymore, because obviously Python will do it now.
I did learn it. It was like one class, and I think because it was so light is what encouraged me to go and like teach a class on it, because I was like, this is the core of what you need to know, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also this whole idea for a while of like, well, is NoSQL going to be the big thing? And so people were still a little bit on the fence of like, do we commit fully to SQL or not?
Yeah. Hi, Beverly.
I got nothing.
Me neither. Oh, dang it. Something's happening there. All right. Well, I don't know what's going on with that, but we can try behind door number 2.
Victor!
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, finally. Oh my god. You finally back.
So I imagine, Victor, you haven't been hearing what we were chatting about, but one key thing that I think both Joe and Sadie were saying, mainly Sadie, is that when she learned data science, it was very heavy on the modeling piece, but not so heavy on the data engineering piece. And so that kind of left this big hole in her understanding as she got into the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. The same stuff kind of happened to me because for me, I've been a data engineer way back, and I didn't even heard about like data science like since 5 years ago. And I was like, oh, there's a whole new world about this stuff. And there's a lot of people knowing this stuff. And there was a huge gap to understand what were even the models, what we were targeting. And for me, it was like a huge experience to learn this other stuff. And it's like when I used to be software engineer too, only, and it's like this gap between back end engineer and front end engineer. You have to find a way to communicate to go to there. So it's like a cornerstone for and good pillar to go ahead with that.
So good. So good. So, all right. The other pieces that I've been thinking about is just in this conference while we're here uh, is how there's so many things that the data scientist like doesn't recognize from the data engineer's point, but also vice versa, right? So the data engineer, I think a lot of times they're serving the data scientists, but maybe they're not really that empathetic to their needs. And I would love to chat about like what you all have done or things that you've seen work well to make sure that you're best serving the data scientist.
Hmm. Yeah, sure. I agree. One of the what big topic over there is like and he has worked for me recently, is the pair programming, knowing a little bit of each world. Because if you don't know a little, if you as a data engineer, if you don't know data science, you won't know like basically your customer needs and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Empathy is important. I think maybe it's sometimes better explained by anti-patterns. So how would you cause division and animosity and hatred amongst the two groups? I always like to look at things through what would you want to avoid doing. Let's see where to begin. There are many. Probably that would be a whole conference in itself. But some big ones is treating data engineering and data science as two separate silos that may get together during the annual company pizza party and not talk to each other apart from that. Similar to how software engineers and data engineers often communicate or don't communicate, more to the point, which is where when you have upstream dependencies, like software engineers are an upstream dependency of data data engineers are often an upstream dependency of data scientists and so forth. When you create silos and kingdoms, and especially when product managers or project managers aren't aligned across these different functions, I think that's when you start getting a lot of the problems that occur, right? And then you don't have the empathy, you don't have the team collaboration and building, you don't have the pair programming that Victor mentioned. There's no pairing of anything.
Mhm.
So it's very balkanized. And so I think that that's a good way if you wanted your data projects to ultimately fail, or have done everything in your power to make things very difficult for yourself, then you should do what I just advised, which is like set up highly siloed, highly balkanized teams that don't talk to each other.
Yep.
And you should totally do that. That's a good idea. What do you think, Sadie?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues is just like a lot of people don't understand what the bigger picture is that you're building for, right? I mean, whatever you're building, data scientists have a piece of it, data engineers have a piece, and that piece adds up to the whole puzzle, right?
Mhm.
And it's like people we're working on as a team to fill in the puzzle, but nobody saw the end state of what that puzzle looks like oftentimes, right? Or maybe even worse, you have like a PM who poorly communicates it to like
Mhm.
each of those technical teams, right? So not to like throw the PM under the bus in this situation and be like, it's not the data scientists or
Do
data
it.
engineers, it's the PM, right?
Yeah.
Which I feel like there should be a teacher or something that's like, it's not my fault, it's the PM didn't fill out the ticket properly kind of thing.
Yeah.
But but I see that happen so often is like even the data scientists maybe don't understand the full picture, or the data engineers. And so just as much as you said of like, yes, not working in silos, but like we have to see what that end puzzle looks like for what each piece we're bringing to the table. And then we have to collaborate as data scientists and data engineers to see where do our pieces fit together, right? But it's so hard to even determine where your pieces fit together if you don't know what the end state looks like that you're building. And that is where I just see so many teams fail time and time again.
Yep. Yeah. But just blame the PM. That's the easiest thing to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's all their fault. No, that's a really good point. It's I think it helps if you've worked in other areas, like you come from software, Victor. I've worked in software and data science and so forth. And I think it's good to have that kind of experience either downstream, so you know what good looks like, or upstream, so you kind of understand, okay, like this is how the data is probably going to be generated downstream, and these are the unseen impacts or things that data engineers are probably not even aware of, that I can bring to the table. So I think if you've worked in the other positions, it certainly helps. I think with that piece of just understanding, okay, so what do the stakeholders need that I'll be providing data to?
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think if there will be more of a rise of like a full stack, in a way, data engineer, full stack data
Yep.
scientist coming
I
forward, given the fact of like AI tools and what we can do. I mean, like this last weekend, I was playing around with like Replit and Cursor, and I'm just like, I was never a full stack developer and feel like I am now, right? And so like that is only going to soon cross over into our data world and our data tech stack. Does that mean we're going to switch back from like these siloed roles to more of like a full stack data professional role?
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
yeah, I agree on that one. And that's something that has been ringing my bell like the last couple of years. Before we used to be like a half, as I told, back end engineer, front end engineer, and all this tech is like it got easier to be to mix both worlds together. I think as data science and engineering get more easier to handle, we will have two worlds merged together, and it is a big impact, to be honest. And I think the bridge is already there, and it will be go more narrow and narrow between those two professions. I won't be surprised in the future if we will have a full stack. I don't know how we would call it, like engineer sciences or something like that. But yeah, it's basically it is amazing how it will work. But I'm more than sure, especially with AI tools right now.
It's an interesting one. I mean, so OpenAI just announced today the release of O1, the new model, and it got me thinking about kind of the broader context in which all these things sit. Because like you mentioned, you're able to have like somewhat superpowers, Sadie, and and we wrote about this in the fundamentals of data engineering, where it felt like, even this was before ChatGPT, but it felt like the roles were actually going to converge to what we called the live data stack. So the rise of streaming, for example, and that becoming, I think, the next first-class citizen in the data world, and the fact that products are becoming more modularized and commoditized, and the missing piece is interoperability. But assuming that's solved, the feedback loop between software, data, and ML, it shrinks, which means use cases get tighter. And so it does make me wonder, for a lot of use cases, do the roles converge? I would argue probably yes. But with the rise of these new tools, like again with with Strawberry or the O1 model today, I mean, it can apparently do PhD level reasoning on math science problems. I'm like, the broader question I had is, okay, so like, what does that do to science teams at companies? Do you just not do it anymore? And so, I know a lot of people who are starting companies right now who are basically just leveraging AI API calls for a lot of the work. It's pretty shocking. Like one of my friends is trying to raise money for his startup right now, and some VCs are like, "Well, how big is your engineering team?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just me and Claude AI."
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
I think we're gonna have to start naming like the agents and stuff to put them like on our team chart, right? Because it's just like no one will believe you if it's just one person. But yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I don't think people are gonna lose their jobs in ways to it, but I think our scope of what we manage is going to expand. And the main reason for it is because in the past I would put in a request to have this data model or to have something built and then wait a few days and then see what I got back and realize it's not right, make some changes, work back and forth. Now, all I see that's happening is we're still putting in requests to these models and these agents to help us in building, but we get immediate feedback almost. I mean, that's what I was loving building with Replit this past weekend was just, I would put in a request and it, within like 10 seconds, it'd show me a preview of my web page of what I built. Then I'd say, okay, move this box over here, and immediately it would change it and happen. And so for me, it's like maybe that back and forth of the problems that we're facing within data science and data engineering teams of like the miscommunication or misalignment could be solved by some of these tools, maybe replacing the data scientist or replacing the data engineer and having that one person work directly. Because instead of waiting a day or two, I'm getting instant feedback from the work that's happening.
Yeah. One of the things that I read too most is like that jobs won't be lost, like it will evolve. Because in the past, before Azure, AWS, we had people building data centers for each one or building servers, and this was way different. Right now, the same people that focus on that switch to they build everything in the cloud. Everything is they have the knowledge, they have the how to connect all these networks. So it has changed a lot, and I think that, for example, for me, when I was digging into data science world, for me it was hard at the beginning. I didn't understand quite a bit, but with the GPT and all this stuff, it was way easier to understand. You can even tell it, "Hey, explain it for a 5-year-old how this will be," and it's easier. It gives you good concepts, and then after that I was creating models and it got way easier to do all this stuff. I think one of the basically biggest challenge that we are facing right now, it could be the remote communication that we have between those big careers over there, because it's hard. Like remotely, we have to got used to it, like working with people from other time zones, other countries. That's how far we have went before this open world remote work that we have, and communication has not been that good. And I think the different strategies or cross work that we do between those two fields, it will help. Okay, for example, cross teams work, it will help. And the pair programming I mentioned before too, it kind of closed and narrow the gaps, because for you it's like as I said before, like the data science is your customer, but at the same time you're the customer of the data science, and you need to provide each other with enough feedbacks and information to accomplish goals together. What do you think about the remote works and all this? How it had impact you in your lives?
I mean, I grew up working in a traditional office environment. So I remember the days of cube farms Really bad pleated khakis and pizza in the break room. People cooking fish in the break room. It's disgusting. I remember what that was like. I can't say that I miss it. At the same time, when I visit offices, which I do once in a while, more to give talks and give high fives and stuff, it's interesting because I feel like there's a sense of camaraderie that it's really hard to get with remote work, and there's a sense of collaboration. I think that lends itself in an environment like that. My opinion is you should do both if you can. Like I was on a hike today with somebody who flew in to see it, from New York City to go see his team because he has an office here in Salt Lake City where I live. Why not just keep that all Zoom calls? Why meet your team at all? Why have an office at all? Right? That's kind of a weird thing, but he does, and because it worked for them. But I think that to paint, I often see a lot of like big CEOs say, "Well, remote work's stupid, and everyone has to come back to the office," or office work is stupid and we need to stay remote. I think it depends on the company culture you have and like what works best for the culture and for the specific team or department you're in. I don't think there's a one size fits all for any of this stuff. But for hard problems like data, I think it does help to physically meet and whiteboard. But you can solve a lot of this now with stuff like Loom and other products that do, I think, a fairly good job at asynchronously helping with this. But I think as well, though, I mean, how often do we just stare at screens like this all day, being on video calls, right? I think there's a bit of a fatigue at this after a while.
Yeah.
So I can feel like I'm in an office meeting right now. I don't feel like we're on a webinar, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's just something so magic about the whiteboard, and like virtual whiteboards do not like compare. And there's something like that just is like magical about being in a room with other engineers, data scientists, and each having the ability to write on the whiteboard. That I haven't found anything that can replace that quite yet. I was hoping with remote work it would be better because it'd be like documentation is better, or how people write, Jira tickets is better, that type of thing. But I think the whiteboard still trumps everything, and there's still a place for teams coming in collaboratively.
Yeah, nobody reads the documentation unless if it exists, nobody reads it.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the empathy part. Oh, sorry, Beverly, what did you say?
I was going to say, people ask me all the time, what's your favorite tool? And they kind of laugh because I say the whiteboard. It's my favorite tool. It's my favorite collaborative tool. But it's also a way to think through the data engineering and the data science. Like, how do you go about hypothesizing a model before you start putting hands on keys? So yeah, I've always found that to be a really useful tool.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Victor, the pair programming and empathy part, right? You've tried pair programming remotely, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
have you tried that in person as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's way different experience. Recently, I went to the office, and one of my peers that I just met first time in person, we were like always good communication. There was no issue in communication. But when I went to the office, it was funny because she was like one desk away, and when she was like, "Oh, I have a question," and the solution was like this. Once different from Teams or other way of communication or chat, it is harder to. You have to wait. Probably you lose the track of mind or the train of thoughts that you will probably have. But in pair programming, obviously in person, you can sit between two persons. You learn from each other at that moment, and ideas just brainstorming at the moment. It just comes out. It's easier in that sense. Even though that tech has go to a place that we can call that other person, it's not the same because sometimes you want to do a follow up. I don't know, 10 minutes after the call, and you have to send a message, and it's way different. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we've talked quite a bit about remote. And what I'm wondering too is, what is your final piece of advice for how data engineers and data scientists can better collaborate? If you had to leave the audience with one piece of advice, what would you say?
I would say per program and improve communication between the two areas. That's the takeaway that has worked so far for me. And the empathy about the setting sometimes boundaries is good, especially if you are in different countries, because sometimes your time is way different. I have worked with people that is 9 hours ahead of me, 6 hours ahead of me, or 3 hours before me. So it's different. So that sense of empathy, as we mentioned, the per programming, it can go a long way into improving that type of communication.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just say whatever side of the fence you're on, like do the other person's job or at least try, you know?
Yeah.
And then you'll just you'll learn the terms of how to talk to those people better. You'll, to Victor's point, have more empathy for what they do, right? And, you know, take the time to really get to know what is that big picture that you're trying to build and, you know, try something new out. Don't get stuck
Yeah.
in your own way of doing things. Who knows? Maybe you'll switch over to the other team too. Like you may end up being like, actually, this is better, right? And be like Joe and be a recovering data scientist and switch over to data engineering.
Definitely.
So try to walk a mile in their shoes and build some empathy. I had a colleague, he's a chief data analytics officer, and that's one of the things that we talked about on a podcast interview. He said, I don't think there's enough empathy for data engineers to understand what data scientists do, and for data scientists to understand what data engineers are doing. So I get that point completely. Any other final thoughts or advice?
I don't have much to add that hasn't been said. That's, you know, all awesome stuff. I would say, you know, if you're able to, go get lunch with somebody. I mean, I think best bonding moments at work have always just been getting lunch with people and getting to know them. You know, I think nothing helps more than just, I think, people seeing each other as people and not just as somebody who's an avatar on Slack. So,
Right.
you know, which unfortunately the world we're in right now, everything's become depersonalized, and I think that's it's taken away a bit from the you know, the experience of building great things together. So,
Yeah.
but let's get back to
No,
that.
that's a simple. There's a lot to be said for it. Excellent. Well, thanks for
What's
all
up,
your
Demetrius?
thoughts about this data engineers working together.
Yes. Thank you all for coming and doing this. It was very cool and nice to see. Beverly, thank you for sticking with it and making it here. I appreciate that. We had some fun, and it wouldn't be a virtual conference or a virtual event by any standards if we didn't have a little bit of technical difficulty. So we made it happen.
You got a new sweater.
I got a new sweater. Yeah, because it's
Oh
cold.
yeah.
Nice.
Good eye.
Yeah, Joe. Yeah, thank you for noticing. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Now I'm kicking you off the stage. You're out of here. All right. See you later. See you everybody later. See y'all.